So I was just experimenting with creating some moss-like textures and thought that I would take a moment to walk through the process thus far. I'm going to start by starting a new project. I'm going to do 512 by 512. Again, a nice simple number when you're doing graphics. Next thing I'll do is select a greenish color, a darker green, something along those lines. I will use my paint bucket tool to fill that in. And then we're going to create some noise. So we'll go to our filters. I'm going to go to noise and I will just do the HSV noise. I will leave the hue probably where it is, a little bit on the low end. Saturation I will take up quite a bit. So now we have a nice speckled look. Now I'm going to create a new layer. I will select the foreground color since I have that selected anyway. And now I'm going to do more noise, but I'm going to do a different one. And rather than going to noise, I'm going to go to rendering and use one of those options, and I will select solid noise. I'm going to select turbulence. I'm going to take the detail up a fair amount. I will change this from replace to overlay so that we get kind of this fuzzy layer over the top that still has some degree of detail. I'm going to grab the opacity and I'm going to slide it down a little bit so that we start getting some of that underlying texture showing through. Let's try another filter. I'm going to go to my noise again, and I'm going to try spread, and we'll see what that does for us. So if we grab the horizontal or vertical, we will see that they are linked. If I want to change that, I can just unlink them right here. But for my part, I'll just take this up a little bit to just get a little bit more of a speckled, bumpy effect, and we'll say okay. So I've got these nice little patterns happening, but I'd like a little bit more happening within. So what I'm going to do is go back to the background and I'm going to duplicate that layer. Let's actually hide the top layer for the moment. So let's just give it another name and call it distortion. And I'm going to try one or two things. First of all, I'm going to go to my filters and I'm going to do a motion blur or a zoom motion blur. And that'll create this kind of effect like you're going to hyperdrive or warp drive or whatever the case might be. And if we turn that top layer back on, we can see how it sort of starts to look like little fronds of moss that are growing. I can play with the blurring factor a little bit, although quite frankly, I think where it was probably fine. So I'll leave it right around the default. I'm going to go ahead and say okay. And then on top of that, what I will do is I will go to filters again, and I'm going to do a distortion. And I think what I'll do is a ripple. We can just kind of play around with the settings a little bit to just get whatever distortion we want. But the whole idea is to not just have this linear stuff shooting out from the middle in straight lines. I want to get some curves or some things happening that sort of shift it around a little bit so that there's a perception of, for lack of a better word, randomness. I'm going to check tileable and I'll say okay for the moment. I'm going to hide these other layers and we can see that I've got a little bit of a problem here. I've got this dark happening. So I think what I'll do is just go to my tools and I will do selection and I will select by color and select those dark colors and I will just go ahead and delete them. But apparently I didn't create an alpha layer. So let's just try that again. I'm going to go to layers. I'm going to go to transparency. I will add an alpha channel and let's just try deleting again. So now if I turn these layers back on, we get something that looks a little bit more like this. So now I want to play with my transparencies a little bit before I do anything else. So I think for each layer, with the exception of the bottom layer, I'm going to take the opacity down to 0. And then each layer, I will just adjust a little bit at a time, getting it to the point where it starts to show the characteristics that I would like. So the one other thought that I have is that I might want to actually put some highlights in here. So I think one more time, what I'm going to do is I'm actually going to create a new layer. I'll just have it be transparent. And I'm going to go to my color selector and I'm going to pick a light green and a paintbrush tool. And let's get that size down to something appropriate. Maybe I'll zoom in a little bit as well. And for brush type, one of the items that maybe is a little bit more random. Oh, again, I need to go back and adjust my size. And I'm just going to go in and do a little bit of highlighting and maybe pick a few spots where I would like to see some possible highlights. It's okay if it's a little blotchy. And then one more time, let's go to this layer and let's adjust the opacity. And maybe here we'll even start with the same filtering that we did at the beginning, where I will go to a noise and I will just do an HSV noise to give it a little bit of texture. Do a little touch up with the eraser in areas that were maybe a little too distinct. And then maybe I go with something like this. I might go ahead and add some brown into this, maybe a layer underneath with a little bit of brown. But minus that, something like this should work for my purposes at the moment.